going to skim past some of my slides because it's all been quite well covered, some of the material. So as discussed, there's quite a lot of guidance out there on overheating already, but we've had calls from the Committee on Climate Change that they want us to offer more than just guidance. For some background on them, the Committee on Climate Change was established under the Climate Change Act 2008, and they're an independent statutory body who provide advice and guidance to government, and they also monitor the progress of government of what we're doing. The Adaptation Subcommittee, they are a part of the Committee on Climate Change. They were also established under the Climate Change Act 2008, and their job is to support the CCC on climate change adaptation matters. They provide advice on climate change risks, and they also evaluate government's progress on adaptation. So what is it that they actually evaluate? So government does a few pieces of work in this area. Under the Climate Change Act, we're required to publish a climate change risk assessment. That's a CCRA, and we do that every 5 years. It assesses the risks in the United Kingdom from both current and predicted impacts from climate change. And the Adaptation Subcommittee provides evidence to the government to help inform this assessment. The second CCRA identified risk to health, well-being and productivity from high temperatures as an area where a lot more action is needed from government. So after the CCRA, every 5 years, the government produces the National Adaptation Programme. The NAP sets out actions that the government is and will be taking to address the risks and opportunities from a changing climate. So this last year, 2008, in 2018, their last NAP was published, and it set out what the government is going to do about high temperatures in homes. However, since the NAP was published, we've actually had some fairly significant policy development in this space. So the CCC often calls government to do more in this area, and in response to the CCC Adaptation Subcommittee report in 2015, we agreed to do some research. And that research was possible because of the work by CIBSE and this method that was developed. So we used this TM59 to do our research. So, we did research into overheating in new homes. So the research used dynamic thermal modelling and the CIBSE TM59 method to assess overheating risk in new homes. It was focused on so it's only new homes, no other types of buildings, and it's split into two general phases. The publish isn't yet published, but it will come out sometime in next year. So phase 1 identified which homes are likely to overheat. It looked at 8 different property types. So it looked at detached properties, semi-detached, terraces. It considered both communal and individual heating systems. It also considered both naturally ventilated and mechanically ventilated properties. It looked at 5 locations across England, including Southampton, Nottingham, Leeds, both inner and outer London as examples of urban heat island. So sort of broad outcomes of this phase was that there's a lot of variation across the country in overheating, but generally new homes exceeded the overheating threshold to some extent everywhere. Phase 2 of the research, we then looked at mitigating overheating. So we assessed a number of mitigation packages, 5 in total. We looked at what would happen if we introduced blinds, smaller glazed areas, shading, thermal mass, air conditioning, lots of different packages, and what would the impact on overheating be? How much would it be reduced from introducing these different packages? It was tested in 3 locations instead of the original 5, and it was also tested in fewer property types, and this was just because it was found in phase 1 there was less variation than we expected across the country. It was found from the second phase that generally overheating can be mitigated in most circumstances using passive measures, not all, but most. And these sorts of passive measures were shading and extra ventilation. The particularly unique part about this research was that we quantify the costs and benefits of overheating mitigation. So what we did was we looked at the capital costs of the measures, so the shading, the smaller windows, all of those sorts of things, the air conditioning systems, and we also costed carbon in this. And the benefits that we looked at were the benefits of mitigating were the reduction in mortality from reducing overheating. So it's a terrible reality that some people will die in very, very hot homes. And also a reduction in a loss of productivity due to sleep loss. So the idea being that if your home is too hot, you can't sleep at night, you go to work the next day, you're tired, and you're not as productive in the economy as you would normally be. And this was all compared to a counterfactual scenario, so not just compared to the world as it is right now, it's compared to a warming climate, and what might happen in the future is that people may install more air conditioning in their homes if their homes are too hot. So we looked at the likelihood of air conditioning being retrofitted, and also the cost to the person that would be retrofitting that air conditioning, and also the cost of carbon. So not just the Committee on Climate Change, but as discussed, we've had some further parliamentary scrutiny this year, and that was in the Environmental Audit Committee's inquiry into heat waves. So the Environmental Audit Committee is a committee of cross-party members of Parliament, so Labour, Conservatives, many different members of Parliament make up the committee. And they set out a series of questions at the start of their inquiry, one of which particularly related to me and my team, which is, are the building regulations aligned with the goals of the National Adaptation Programme? So the government provided a written response to the EAC about, or gathered from all across government actually, from Public Health England, from the Department of Health and Social Care, from DEFRA, from us, and then also the EAC invited government ministers to appear in front of them and give oral evidence also. So the ministers that attended were Department of Health and Social Care, DEFRA and MHCLG appeared in front of the Environmental Audit Committee. At the end of the inquiry, the EAC produced a report in which it recommended, as the 1983 Building Regulations Act was written with the protection of people's health in mind, the government should use this enabling power to create a regulation to stop buildings being built which are prone to overheating. So that was their recommendation to us. This is their report. And in response, so the government then did a cross-governmental response to this report also, and we responded that MHCLG will consult on a method for reducing overheating risk in new homes. It will be done alongside the government's review into the energy efficiency standards of the building regulations. A range of different methods will be considered so that people can demonstrate compliance with any new requirement. We'll use our research to inform this new standard, and any method that we produce must be practical for house builders, because we have a range of house builders across the country, big developers, but also people that only build maybe 1 or 2 houses a year. It needs to be practical for them as well. So, our review. Later this year, we will be consulting on changes to a range of our different building regulations. This will include the energy efficiency requirements, that's part L of the building regulations, and that was announced in the Clean Growth Strategy 2 years ago. We'll also be consulting on changes to our ventilation requirements. That's part F of the building regulations. That was announced in Building a Safer Future implementation plan. We'll also be consulting alongside those two on a method for introducing some sort of method for reducing overheating risk in new homes. So we're still working on exactly what's going to be part of this large package of changes and what's going to be included in this consultation. It's going to be later this year, the actual consultation itself, and I'm here in part just to invite as many of you as possible to know it's going to happen, and to invite as many of you as possible to respond to the consultation so that we have a really good idea of what we're proposing, whether it's practical and useful and it's going to do the job that we all want it to do.